Hello everyone, it's Vivi, and before we dive into the credits analysis for Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, there is one question you perhaps have asked yourself when watching the credits for the very first time, and that question is the following. Are the events depicted during the credits canon? First off, if you are not familiar with the term canon, the word simply means that whatever is being shown, or whatever's happening, it's actually part of the story or timeline. In this case, the events shown after completing the game's story seem to represent what actually happened next. The majority of the scenes being shown here gives us an idea of what our heroes have been up to after defeating the Emperor and restoring the dimensions. So with that said, let's have a look at what's going on and try to understand it. We have a huge crowd cheering our heroes, Ratchet, who for some reason really reminds me of Winnie the Pooh, I just cannot unsee it. We have Clank, Rivet, and Kit. Now, where is this, you might ask? Well, our story ended in Megalopolis. The Emperor tried ruling Megalopolis, tried deeming it as New Nefarious City. He thought dealing with the pirates and the resistance wasn't enough to stop his hunger for success. Actually, his massive thirst for success went to his head, so much in fact he was willing to risk destroying all dimensions. To his words, collapse every dimension into nothingness. So logically speaking, this appears to be Megalopolis due to a few simple factors. The citizen right there, they look exactly like the ones we saw in Megalopolis. The fact they all seem organic is something worth considering as well. Remember, Nefarious City's population is all made up of robots, so I believe this factor alone rules out Nefarious City. Okay, to be fair, we do have the same type of citizens at Xerxes in Rivet's dimension, you know, at the gastropub. This isn't a case of these citizens only existing in Ratchet's dimension. But let's not forget the fireworks we saw in the ending scene, which I believe fits the mood of this scene. Next up, our heroes are sitting at Xerxes. How do we know that this is Xerxes? Well, apart from the obvious telltale signs, you know, the drinks on the table, we have the surroundings to look at, the taxidermies on the wall. A nice shot by Kristen Boris, outsourcing artist at Insomniac Games. Speaking of which, there is a cool art blast, like a full art gallery which was shared back in July. I'll leave a link in the description below. So yup, we are at Xerxes. What's important to point out in this scene, Clank gets his arm fixed, and look! It's yellow. Why yellow and not Clank's original color palette? Well, it's possible Clank's fondness of Rivet is what made him decide to go with yellow. This being the case of Rivet simply having a yellow spare arm lying around, I'd say the chances are slim. Remember, Rivet was never too fond of robots on Sargasso. Rivet did say that robots weren't her thing, especially when they're tearing the galaxy apart. Clank had even reiterated to Gary what she said. Ratchet never had any wariness of robots when he met him, yet Rivet does. So automatically you wonder, why would she have a spare robotic arm in her home? What we'd like to believe here is they simply ordered a new arm for Clank. Speaking of fondness, Clank's new yellow arm could have direct correlation with what Rivet mentioned to Clank on Talwyn 4 while they were trying to evade the Fixer. She said not to listen to him, Bolts, that if he's broken, so is she, and her thinking that they're pretty awesome. This was a response to the Fixer believing that Clank was a fellow broken one. When I analyzed the ending, Ratchet mentioning a pit stop made me think of exactly this. Going back to Xerxes, getting Clank's arm fixed, and perhaps getting to know Rivet better. Let's proceed. Up on the bar we have what appears to be Nefarious City, the Emperor's statue. If we try and piece these sequences of events together, it's possible there was a broadcast at Xerxes showing the statue, perhaps news coverage of the Emperor's defeat, if we make a guess. The credits then transition into the actual monitor, showing us what happens eventually. We have Rivet, Kit, Ratchet, and Clank bringing down the statue in Nefarious City. Now that the Emperor is gone, one wonders, what will they call Nefarious City? Interesting question, ain't it? Anywho, now we can't really tell if Clank already has his new arm here. If that were the case, then we could easily say that this, right here, pulling down the statue happens after their trip at Xerxes, where Clank got his new arm. Moving on, one of my favorite scenes in the credits. We have Dr. Nefarious at the exit of the Emperor's office. He simply takes one more look at what could have been, him winning and taking the Emperor's place pretty much. What happens here? He turns off the lights. As for how he got here, after he no longer had the Dimensionator, I mean, if we go back to Megalopolis, he did get crushed by that giant Imperial power suit. Crushed in a way where he couldn't move, he's still alive. Either A, he snuck in via a rift when our heroes went back to Rivet's dimension, or B, it's up in the air. I love the symbolism that's being shown here, that it's time to flip the switch and move on from all this. What does he do? He goes back to Lawrence, who is now a father and perhaps married. If you recall, during our first battle with Dr. Nefarious in Megalopolis, he did mention that this is what he gets for giving his assistant paid paternity leave. This was when he wasn't impressed by hiring the goons for less. He's showing affection here. It just goes to show that underneath all that diabolical persona of his, he truly cares about his assistant. If the paternity leave wasn't enough to explain this, then what is? I'm really glad we saw a bit of Nefarious's caring side here. After all, in All for One, he seemed to have enjoyed that temporary closeness to our group, a sense of friendship. A taste of it, call it. One scene in Rift Apart which I feel resonates well with this part in the credits, this one, where the Emperor wonders why he didn't feel enough satisfaction. Our Nefarious did say that he equated happiness with success, and now that he's achieved it, life is meaningless. So applying this scene to this scene in the credits, Dr. Nefarious knows what it's like to lose. That life isn't just about success, winning all the time, but it's ups and downs. That's what differentiates our Nefarious from the Emperor. That's how much he's developed as a character. Although Dr. Nefarious lost, you know, he wasn't able to win, he doesn't let that affect him. Because he knows out of all his failures, he still managed to build a strong relationship with his assistant, and that clearly matters to him. As for our next scene, we have Trudy's species. According to Trudy's description, she's called a pterophoid flyer, raised by the Morts after they realized she fell out of her nest years ago. We could unlock the ability to ride Trudy on Sargasso upon collecting 30 Zerp stones, which is part of an optional objective. As for story purposes, we rode Trudy while trying to defend Sargasso from the Emperor. Whether or not this is actually Trudy we have here, it's hard to differentiate. As for the surroundings, the swampy feel seems to imply Sargasso. After all, this seems to be their home planet as implied in Trudy's description. As for these creatures appearing in Torrent 4 and all, we have to remember that rifts were popping up randomly at that time, creatures wandering around and getting lost. Next up, I'm going to say it right now. I'll dive deeper into Gary's relationship with the plumber in a separate video eventually. For now, let's try to get an idea of what's happening here. As you may all have probably realized by now, the plumber has a son, Gary. Yup, the plumber, this guy. The one who started with the butt crack. The plumber for some time already seemed mysterious, always popping up at the right time to aid our duo. Looking at the character description for Gary, they even deem the plumber as an omniscient father. Gary is doing his best to live up to not only the expectations of his dad and the universe, but to himself. The point is here, father and son are looking inside their book, almost as if they're recording the events. I mean, after all, Gary did point out to Clank and Kit how their skills and efforts at fixing these anomalies are worthy of being written down. To keep it simple and straightforward, we had Clank discussing the book and Gary's father during this mission on Blazar Prime. Gary explained the book contained the most up-to-date knowledge in the universe, as catalogued by his father. And then he goes on to explain that we know his father as the plumber, and that he's apparently on his first vacation ever. Gary's now in charge. The title Prophet was given to Gary by the monks for just pointing stuff out. But perhaps there's more to that title. After all, talking to Gary before leaving Savali with Kit, he was able to guess or predict Kit and Ratchet going on an adventure to Kodaro Station, wishing them both good luck. Ratchet and Kit even wondered, how did Gary even know about that? Before moving on to the next scene, the images themselves are blurry. Can't really tell what they're looking at except for the one on top. The bottom one seems to be a mort, right in the frame of the picture. The one on the right, rough guess, that could maybe be the archives? Very sandy desert type of area, reminds us of Savali. The one right there, rocky looking structure surrounded by water, it could again perhaps be Savali. As for the clearer one, looks like a junkyard with Zircon Jr. in it. We have what appears to be a huge pile of Nefarious troopers, along with the Goons for Less signature belt lying there. Then we have Mrs. Zircon and Zerkies, I presume. You might wonder, is this in our dimension? Let's not forget, lots of troopers appeared while fighting the Emperor on Megalopolis. Why am I saying this? Well, in our dimension, we also have a Mrs. Zircon as a weapons vendor. In our dimension, we have Zircon, acting as a weapon in our arsenal. As for Mr. Fungi, he took on that role in Rivet's dimension. Originally in Into the Nexus, upon upgrading Zircon to level 3, we'd unlock the Zircon family. Technically speaking, upgrading Mr. Zircon once in Into the Nexus would unlock Zircon Jr. Reaching level 3, we unlock the whole family, with Mama Zircon and Zircon Jr. Now looking at the Zircon family in Rivet's dimension, we have a family business, as described by Mrs. Zircon in one of the Spybots we collect. When it comes to our Zircon's actual counterpart, we have Zerky, working at the gastropub, hence Zerky's gastropub. He's the complete opposite of our Zircon, where he's completely against violence and only works at the bar, a violence-free zone as explained in this scene. Now prior to the events in Rift Apart, Skartsu Debris Field, as the name suggests, Debris Field, Skartsu was originally a full planet. That was before the Emperor completely destroyed it. This is according to Mrs. Zircon via one of the Spybots. According to Mrs. Zircon again, their family used to be elite synthoid weapons. Kinda reminds us of Zircon family in our dimension and Into the Nexus, right? Anywho, point is, Zerky, according to Mrs. Zircon, he used to conduct whole symphonies of pain, crushing his foes with ease. He seemed to have been involved in the crushing of Skartsu. If their family were elite weapons at first, it's possible Zerky was employed by the Emperor originally. What happened on Skartsu eventually made him think. He later laid down his weapon and pretty much founded Zerky's gastropub to slay those feelings according to Miss Zircon. An inspiring story, she believed. As for Miss Zircon herself, according to her own words, she built a side business selling and modifying weapons for those still hungry for violence. When it comes to Zircon Jr., in Rivet's dimension, he acts as a host at their Battleplex or Slaughterplex. Miss Zircon explained that Zircon Jr. himself set up the battle arena for those still thirsty for pain. According to the wiki, there's some additional information shared by Zircon Jr., which, if I make a guess, can be heard while inside the gastropub walking around. Zircon Jr. seemed to be a bit bitter about his father's choice of not wanting violence, to an extent where he wished his mom ran the gastropub instead, to allow violence in other words. Something I noticed. Something a bit weird. Walking around inside the bar, we can notice more than one Zircon Jr. acting as busboys. It looks like Zircon Jr. has more than one job, but the thing is, we also see multiples of him. If anything, one could be the actual Zircon Jr., their son. We do hear Zircon Jr. at a point inside the bar. If we try to understand what's going on here, the others are Zircon Jr. looking robots hired by the Zircon family. It's possible the entrance has a different employee deemed a citizen. So the idea of the Zircon family hiring other robots doesn't seem far-fetched. In short, the Zircon family we have here could very much be the family in Rivet's dimension. I do admit, Zerky is green here, just like our Zircon in our dimension. That alone might make you think of that Zircon, the Zircon family in our dimension, because, you know, the colors match. But that could just be an oversight. This huge pile could be at Zerky's, or, in other words, Skartsu Debris Field. So our assumption is this is somewhere outside the bar. Looking deeper into this, there's the possibility of Zerky alone with his family going back to violence, or at least resorting to violence in order to protect their family business, seeing as how they now have weapons attached to them. It's possible they alone slayed this army of nefarious troopers. The Emperor possibly wanted Zerkys destroyed after our big gang left the place, but failed. Rivet did say at one point when first entering the pub that this place is a safe haven for the Resistance, hoping the Emperor didn't find it out. Perhaps he did eventually, but failed, thanks to the Zircon family defending their business. Moving on, the scene zooms onto the goon's emblem, that belt or strap they have hanging over their chests, and we quickly transition to this. We have a goon who takes up meditation with a monk from Savali. As for what made this goon decide to pursue meditation is up in the air. The Goons for Less were originally known as Thugs for Less. They simply rebranded their name, perhaps, due to their poor reputation. The Goons, according to their description page, they're an extended network. So with that in mind, we can't assume that the whole gang, the whole network is pursuing meditation. We'd like to believe that a certain portion of them decided to take up meditation, especially the ones who finally joined our side when taking down the Emperor on Megalopolis. Well, the Goons already showed truce when the gang was at Zerky's and the part where we were escaping Zordoom prison while also saving Ratchet and Kit. As for this part, it's like the complete opposite. A goon acting as a monk, and an actual monk doing bicep curls. Thing is this new to them because they're already pretty much built characters if you look at them. Very similar to the Goons. But one might think, wait a minute, is that Gary? I'd say no, that's not him. If we look at the monks on Savali, they all have similar physical attire, including those feather-like features on their heads. Yes, none of them are wearing gloves. I mean, the only monk we can think of with gloves on is Gary for sure. Then again, a monk could have been told to put on gloves as to protect their hands while lifting dumbbells. Gary also had an eye as a necklace. I think it looks like an eye. Perhaps his gazing eye. It's not here. Another monk teaching a goon how to levitate. This doesn't seem like they're standing on jumping rocks or anything like that. Seeing as how rocks look to be floating in the palm of their hands, I'm thinking of levitation. Yeah, from the stuff we've seen, they can also float. Now look, some rifts have the tendency to suck you in. Other rifts act as simple portals or entrances. The rifts appearing right above their heads after freeing them, they don't seem to be getting sucked in. It's like they willingly travel in there while floating or levitating. Now you might ask, how did they actually learn how to levitate? Seeing as how Gary was a student, well, is a student of the mysteries of the multiverse, and seeing as how rifts naturally pull you in, perhaps it has something to do with that. Anywho, let's move on. We have Rivet back at her home, on what appears to be Sargasso. The portrait on top we actually saw during this cutscene, Clank looking around and spotting that portrait. As for who these characters are apart from Quantum, well, that's Klatchki and Moidoy. They were at some point part of the Emperor's hit list as depicted in this scene. It's very possible that Klatchki and Moidoy were actually struck down, because we don't hear about them or their status like at all. Even when they were all taken to Zordoom, there were no signs of these two. Now looking at her brand new portrait, we got the Morts, Kit, Clank, Ratchet, and Rivet. I believe they're enjoying lemonade. Lemonade is pretty much the Morts' essence. These guys love lemonade. Clank's holding onto a piece of mysterious fruit. The only purple thing similar to this would be Zerpstone, the plant we fed Trudy. The idea we get out of this scene, while our heroes are getting to know one another better. Let me ask you a question. If you believe that the pit stop which Ratchet mentioned, if you believe that was the Lombax dimension he was referring to, do you think this scene right here is just more natural? I mean, before going to the Lombax dimension, our duo spending time and getting to know each other better. Doesn't that feel more natural if you think about it? The Lombax dimension, look, the perfect dimension Mags was tasked to find, it could be a whole big potential setup for a sequel. Naturally, one would think our duos would want to know each other better first, before embarking on such a journey. In the next scene, our group is saying hi to Glitch. Glitch, who was given to us by Phantom in Nefarious City. Glitch first felt unsure of this Ratchet character. I mean, it's natural, she meets a stranger, she gets uncertain. Glitch also started off as someone who lacked a lot of confidence until she realized what she was really capable of. We'd like to assume that Glitch already fully knows Rivet. Unfamiliar faces for Glitch would be Clank and Kit. Notice how they're both waving their hands and saying hi, pretty much. Here we got the Emperor's assistant, who seems to be enjoying her new temporary position, perhaps. With the Emperor no longer in the picture, she simply might believe that she can finally rule the universe herself, at least according to her description. She's always yearned for this position, and yeah, as the description points out, she was hired as warden of Zerdun Prison, until she got fired for poor management skills, ranging from prison break to billions of bolts worth of damage. And now she finally thought she had it, only to get bombarded by Mrs. Zircon and Phantom. After she escapes, Mrs. Zircon falls flat on her face, and Phantom is covering his ears. Logically, if this were due to loud alarms going off, and assuming that the assistant had troopers still working for her, why would they just stand there, right? I think she's simply scared because the Emperor got defeated by these guys, and she's screaming her lungs out, and it hurt their ears. Next up, we're on Yardolis, with Pierre Lefebvre and with a few pirates. It's like an exchange is going on here, an exchange of a golden figure of the Emperor. Bubbles gives them Captain's head back. Captain Quantum, the pirates thought, was a robot. A feared captain at that. Oh, and Quantum, his full name is Carl Lepton Quantum. When his helmet fell off, pirates were shocked and disgusted by the fact that his head got defiled. They even closed off Yardolis at a point in memory of Captain Quantum's departure. So the question is, are they seeking Captain Quantum's helmet as memorabilia, thinking that he actually died? Or they just want the helmet as loot? To try and answer that, looking at the battle in Megalopolis, Pierre and Quantum are teamed up and Quantum is wearing his hat. His captain hat, which he miraculously recovered one way or another. And he is riding a pirate ship. So it seems like Pierre, Quantum, and pirates have come to terms with one another. After all, the pirates were helping us out when defeating the Emperor. And yeah, it's a likely possibility that the pirates are seeking the helmet just for loot in this case. Unless this scene takes place before they all teamed up to stop the Emperor, I think the coming to terms thing still stands. Last time we saw this helmet was on their ship with Ratchet and Clank before revisiting Savali. With all the chaos happening, it's likely this helmet found its way back on Yardolis eventually. Now here's an interesting one. We have Ratchet, Clank, and Talwyn, Ratchet's girlfriend. If you guys weren't aware, going back to the 15th anniversary art book, it is confirmed that Talwyn is Ratchet's girlfriend. And since they're together here, it's likely possible that they are still together. So what's going on here? It looks like they're looking at the dimensional map. How can we tell? The hologram structure of this thing, it looks very, very similar to what we saw in this scene with Ratchet and Kit, where they both entered the dimensional archives and saw the dimensional map still safe and intact. Zooming in, the logo on the orb also seems like the one we have in the scene. So yes, this looks to be the dimensional map. Ratchet points at the archives. Him pointing at the archives could mean that the dimensional map has been relocated. Relocated somewhere where Ratchet is free to take a look at it, and why? Well, this could be something for a future sequel, aka trying to locate the Lombax dimension. The most logical reason as to why they would relocate the dimensional map, well, to keep it safe. At a point, the Emperor got his hands on it, and was able to easily find Megalopolis, we'd like to believe. I don't think this was a case of Dr. Nefarious revealing the coordinates for Megalopolis. After all, Dr. Nefarious was baffled by the thought of the Emperor taking over his own dimension. By own, meaning our dimension. Going back to this, the last we saw of this dimensional map was when the Emperor stole it from us. After that, what happened to it? It's up in the air, but we can only guess what happened. A possibility, like I mentioned, it got relocated to keep it safe. Perhaps they all agreed to keep this map safe in Ratchet's dimension this time. If it weren't for Ratchet pointing at the archives, then we could have simply believed that Ratchet took Talwyn on a dimensional trip and visited the archives on Savali, which would still contain the dimensional map in this case. But I think we can all agree that at least relocating the map after what happened is the wisest move. Fun fact, when looking at Talwyn, Ratchet did mention her on Savali. If you stand long enough on this balcony, Ratchet thinks of Talwyn and wishes she was here to see this.
Wow. I wish Talwyn was here to see this.
Another thing I'd like to add, again the pit stop. It's possible this is what Ratchet would want to do before even embarking on the journey to the Lombax dimension. In other words, simply meant getting Clank's arm fixed and getting to know Rivet better. Naturally speaking, wouldn't Ratchet inform his girlfriend that, hey, we found a dimensional map at least? You get what I'm saying here? Inform the girl he cares about what he's thinking about doing next. Moving on, we now have a better look at what Ratchet was pointing at. It was indeed the archives. Looking at its surroundings, this must be Savali. So going back to this one with Gary and his dad, that picture must have been Savali then. Anywho, what's happening here, Rivet, Kit, along with Gary and the monks, they all seem to be fixing up Savali. Remember, the archives were destroyed, the Emperor's attempt at locating the dimensional map. Speaking of which, there you see, there's his necklace. That's Gary right there, so if we compare this monk to this, the necklace is a telltale sign of this being Gary. Now we got our answer. Next up, we have the Fixer fixing up Rivet's version of Blizzard Prime. In Rift Apart, using the Blizon crystals, which according to Kit must have absorbed the excess energy released by the dimensional chaos, allowing them to shift to another dimension or version of the planet. As I was saying, when we reach Blizzard Prime with Rivet and Clank, hitting the Blizon would take us to an alternate, undestroyed version of Blizzard. Now, in order to rebuild the Dimensionator, which got destroyed, we needed a new phase quartz, one of the rarest minerals in the universe, which was used by Clank to build the Dimensionator, or to modify it. Remember, the Dimensionator originally, it was a hat. So in order to find another phase quartz, we had to travel to an alternate Blizzard Prime, because the one we visited in Rivet's dimension ended up being destroyed. This version of the planet would be technically number 3. We have ours, which Clank mentions at Xerxes, which we don't see but is simply mentioned. The one destroyed in Rivet's dimension, that's number 2. And this undestroyed version which we use a Blizon crystal to visit, being number 3. So exploring number 3, we stumble across a huge mining drill needed to extract phase quartz. Now going back to this scene, what destroyed Rivet's version of Blizzard? Blizzard number 2 in this case? Well, the mining drill was affected by the rifts which caused the whole thing to destroy Blizzard. This was according to the mysterious stranger via a decoded message from beyond. That one mysterious stranger we met before in Rivet's version of Blizzard Prime. So what happened is, she tried warning us to not turn on the drill. We did, but luckily we were able to turn it off. And now we have the Fixer, who we'd like to believe is here to fix up the place. The Fixer at a point went through a mental crisis. Seeing too many broken things, dealing with the pirates, all of that just got to him and he just completely shut down. When we turned him back on, we come to realize he no longer felt anything could be fixed. His mind just spiraled in complete negativity. That is until Clank improvised and pretended the Fixer fixed him. That was the start of the Fixer getting back on track. He rebuilt the broken phase quartz due to the drill, breaking it, and now here he is rebuilding Rivet's version of Blizzard Prime. Next up, we have Quantum and Quark posing in front of Quark's statue. Who knows when this one exactly took place, but one thing I think we can all agree on, this is at least something that happens after the main story. It's also possible Quantum was given his bucket helmet back. He's wearing it here, again the thing with coming to terms with Pierre and the pirates. Quark, I believe, is teaching Quantum how to feel like a hero. First step is to pose like one. What this hero stuff reminds me of is this absolutely brilliant scene in Ardolis. How Ratchet describes Quark. As a longtime fan of the series, this just hits you right in the feels. Like, You know what Ratchet's talking about here, how far these characters have come. Quantum here comes to a realization, thinking he should try a career change. Perhaps try and do hero stuff, like how he shouts here, doing hero stuff when he launches Ratchet inside the bucket, so he doesn't get sucked into the rift. This scene in Megalopolis, this is something our Quark would say, and Quantum even asks, hey, how's that sound? Part of me wonders if there's any symbolic meaning hiding behind this scene. If you weren't aware, Jim Ward, the original voice for Quark, didn't reprise his role due to illness, sadly. Just the mic thing, talking in the mic, the statue, black and white. Do you think this is a low-key reference to the prior voice actor? If you think about it, we have 3 different voices here. Quantum voiced by Zeke Alton. Quark's statue, if it really does reference the previous voice actor, it could be Jim Ward. Quark today is voiced by Crash Bandicoot's latest voice actor, Scott White. Yup, White also voiced Crash in Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time. Next scene, Kit and Rivet appear to be strolling through the Emperor's headquarters. I mean, with the Emperor gone, surely their curiosity's at its peak. They stumble on a room full of pictures on the wall. The photos we have scrolling on the screen is exactly what we have hung up on the wall. According to some Rift Apart trivia, writer Nick Folkman shared this. Lead writer Lauren Mee was also involved in this. Lauren and I submitted a bunch of ideas for the album covers paintings in the Emperor's office, but sadly my favorite one didn't make the cut. So I just want it to be known that somewhere off-screen, the Emperor also has a painting of himself standing in a giant scallop shell in the ocean as he covers his modesty and is blown to shore, about to be covered by additional Emperors. This was shared on July 21st. These all appear to be vinyl records, and visual references to actual famous statues and sculptures in the world. What I could pick up on: the discus thrower, the thinker, David, and Atlas. As for the writings on them, using Blue Lemon Light's Alien script, the discus thrower, the letters we see, I mean, Y, Y, N, M, E, nothing, pretty random. As for the David one, Nefarious, L-L-A-S-A-C-H-V. Nefarious I can read, but the second word, I'm not sure what it's supposed to mean. Atlas translated to Nefarious World. As for the thinker, Hits and Emperor. Let's proceed. Rivet seems to have found another album. This time we have Dr. Nefarious in the picture frame, and if I make a guess, this is the Join Me at the Top album. A musical track that plays during the credits. Here's some more trivia according to one of the writers on the team, Nick Folkman. Join Me at the Top was something that came in the picture around the end of last year. The team was discussing songs that would be playing at Xerxes. Lauren Mee believed that the Emperor would make the citizens listen to a song about himself. The team wondered, okay, what if the Emperor sang a song about himself? Initially they believed that this song would be what they call a spoken word song, not unlike William Shatner's Rocketman performance. Then they learned 2 things that apparently changed everything. He added, number 1, Robin could sing. Number 2, our music team said we could have a full orchestra. Lauren immediately came up with lyrics for 3 different songs, and I came up with a verse because I can't write songs to save my life, and we sent them to our composer as ideas. By Robin, he means Robin Atkins Downs, just to make it clearer for you folks. Then he said, a few weeks later, we got a demo back containing a song inspired by our lyrics that was 99% the same as what's in the game. There was even a part for Dr. Nefarious. We gave some notes, the song was adjusted, and then we recorded it. When I heard this song, it certainly gave off a Disney villain type of song vibe. I kinda wish this song was actually animated, both the Emperor and Nefarious on scene actually singing, an actual sequence of them singing together. I stumbled on a Join Me at the Top thread on Ratchet Clank Reddit page. Reading the comments, something stuck out. One user mentioned, I was replaying and noticed in the prison section that one of the prisoners said he was thrown in there because he said he didn't like the Emperor's song. I take it if you take enough time exploring Zordoom Prison, you get additional in-game dialogue. like the one mentioned on Reddit. Next up, this appears to be planet Cardelian, Kadaro Station. This is where the Emperor's Imperial suit must have been manufactured, just looking at the in-game dialogue here. When visiting this place with Ratchet and Kit, Kit does say that Kadaro Station houses the Emperor's most secret research, including the only Rubion forge strong enough to build the Dimensionator. Just to add some context to this scene in the credits, Ratchet and Kit went to Kadaro Station in order to forge a new Dimensionator. Access to the Rubion forge was locked, so our duo used a Blizon crystal to travel to another version of Kadaro, an abandoned one from the looks of it. By hitting some Blizon crystals back and forth between each dimension, they managed to access the Rubion forge. Ratchet winging it causes the machine to break down, so they finally resorted to the unpowered version in the abandoned dimension. The way they powered up the machine, well, we have Juice and another Juice to thank for. We first encountered Juice in the abandoned version of Kadaro Station. Junkbot explained that Juice was his best friend. We did eventually try to escape Juice. A point came where our duo was trying to find the power source for the Rubion forge in this version of Kadaro Station. Unfortunately, its power source was missing. We come to realize the power source in the other dimension was an alternate version of Juice. We rescue this version of Juice, it wants to follow us to the other dimension, both versions of Juice meet and they befriend one another. And as a way of saying thanks, they use their bioelectricity. Thing is, this bioelectricity of theirs is something they feast on, store and amplify within their 8 stomachs. Using such power helped power up the alternate Rubion forge and done. Our new Dimensionator was forged. So there you have it. We now have a free happy living Juice and Junkbot, I believe. Notice the patch on Junkbot's body. We do see a patch in this scene, so yes, that appears to be Junkbot and Juice having a fun time. Next up, we have Ratchet and Clank on the dance floor at Zerky's. Looks like a dance floor at Zerky's. I'm guessing they had a bit too much to drink. I mean, think about it. If Ratchet hated the idea of singing during the Pirates trials on Ardolis, yeah, Ratchet actually sang. And along with Clank. By the shore. The Pirate Trials was indeed to reach out to Captain Quantum if you want some added explanation on here. Do you think he would say yes to dancing? Alright, he did a bit of that shaky thing in Up Your Arsenal, but he did that in front of Clank only, his best bud. Imagine doing that in front of a crowd. You know they were at a bar, getting Clank's arm fixed, and drinks probably naturally started coming in. And then look, he pretends his wrench is a guitar. Rivet's holding onto a drink, Kit also is having a fun time. I wonder what Clank is singing. Then we transition to Pierre and Quantum socializing. I guess they're bickering about how Quantum pretended to be a robot all this time. That's just a wild guess. Now, notice how Pierre's eyes focuses on the camera like he's looking at us. Next up, we are on Blizar Prime. Judging from the lineup, or traffic in this case, we'd like to believe this is the alternate version of Blizar with active working miners. By alternate, this would be Blizar Prime number 3. That right there appears to be Chef Tulio and Sous Chef. Those are the 2 chefs known on Blizar Prime. They're perhaps serving soup or stew of some sort, maybe something that's a mix of honey. There was an optional side quest where we needed to help Tulio collect some honey. Bit of context here, we first stumbled on Sous Chef, who asked us to try and locate Tulio, who was not only late, but they needed ingredients to cook food for the miners. It's likely that this takes place shortly after we forged a new phase quartz. Notice how the drill mine is crooked. We did get a dropship to hit the machine in order to get it to stop from wreaking havoc to the planet, which again the mysterious stranger warned us about. And now, we reach the final scene of the credits. Ratchet, Clank, Rivet, and Kit. They look to be in Megalopolis, judging from the building silhouettes in white and all plants around. Clank has his arm already fixed here, so this has to at least happen after visiting Zerky's. They activate the Dimensionator and enter a rift. 2 things could be happening here. A, this is just a cool way of saying thank you for joining us on this interdimensional adventure, or B, this has more meaning to it. It could represent what's to come. Rivet and Kit might join us on our journey to the Lombax dimension, who knows? For one, Ratchet seems to have maybe made up his mind when looking at this line of dialogue in Ardolus, asking Clank if he would help him find the Lombaxes. Rivet certainly already showed interest in finding the Lombaxes on Torrent 4, saying if Ratchet doesn't want to go, she would. If absolutely anything is to be taken seriously out of this scene, remember that question we asked ourselves in the beginning? Whether or not everything is to be accepted as canon in the credits, if anything is to be taken from this part. Well, this could be when Ratchet and Rivet part ways and go back home. Well, Ratchet is already home, speaking of Rivet and Kit here. And I think it is time to stop. This is the end of the video. That's that, folks. Oh, as a reminder, I am now on Patreon. If you're ever curious on becoming a patron on this channel, there's a link in the description below. By becoming a patron, not only will your name appear in the outro of every video, but you can also get access to behind-the-scenes stuff and updates on upcoming videos. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching and thank you for your support. I appreciate it so much. And as usual, if you have your own thoughts, questions, or theories, feel free to share it in the comments section below. And as always, I've been Vivi and thank you for watching. Until next time.